with that, I'm going to introduce Brooke Stuart. This is Brooke. Brooke's awesome. I met Brooke probably about a year ago, and she has such an amazing practice, and I want her to share with you a lot about what she does as a holistic doctor, but also share tips on how to manage your stress and anxiety. Because anytime we talk about stress and anxiety here in the exchange, I do feel like it's a hot topic. And I feel like a lot of people have questions about it, concerns about it, and want to know how to manage it better. So I'm just going to sit down. We're going to do a fireside chat with Brooke, and we're going to have a good hour. And I want you guys to ask lots of questions and feel comfortable. This is a space for you guys to engage and interact. That's what the exchange is all about. So, this is your time to ask a doctor, and just feel really comfortable with it for you, is what is a holistic doctor?
I love
A lot of them
that
might
question.
not know that. So.
Absolutely. So how many people, know about holistic medicine to any degree, even if you just shop at Whole Foods? Awesome. So in my practice, what I do is I look at the whole person, right? We look at their mind, their body, their heart, their life, and we look at their interaction, those interactions with each other, right? It's a very inclusive practice where we can acknowledge that everything affects everything in terms of health and well-being. So my practice, as a holistic doctor, what I actually do is create personalized treatment plans for my patients that include mindset, diet, lifestyle, tips and changes and modifications. And then we'll support that process, and I'll end up partnering with my patients through counseling, acupuncture, and therapeutic interventions like supplementation or specific devices that can drive function and kind of get them closer to where they're headed in terms of their health goals, or whether they just have, like in my practice, I work with a lot of professional athletes who are extreme high performers and really have goals that they want to reach, and they really want to kind of hit personal records and kind of push themselves in that growth-oriented way. So.
Is there any sport in particular that you see come to you more?
Yes, so a lot of baseball and a lot of golf. I played golf at the University of Miami, actually, before.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
So that's how I actually kind of even got interested in holistic medicine, because I was working with a sports psychologist at the time, and I noticed how, all of the mental and emotional work that we were doing together was really impacting like my golf game, but also like my physiology and life experience in general. So that interaction and that holism has always kind of been on my mind, and I really started to notice it as I was playing golf and just trying to, optimize my game.
Did it improve your game?
I didn't know what I knew now then.
Yeah.
So I feel like throughout the journey, I would have been able to help myself a lot more if I had been my doctor.
Yeah.
So knowing not to be conceited. But, when you're working with a sports psychologist, it's very mind focused, right? It's very specific on one thing. Whereas in my practice, it's almost hard not to help people change, because you're literally working on the mental in a certain way, the emotional in a certain way, and the physiological in a very different way. So if you're addressing each piece of the puzzle in its own unique way, how can you not move forward and drive function? Because we all know when we're feeling better physically, we're going to feel better mentally and emotionally, and vice versa. So it's that interaction that I feel like really helps people kind of get out of that rat race, that cyclical kind of like never-ending circuit, where you can actually break through that kind of one step forward, two steps back thing, and build a strong and resilient foundation. So you're literally just moving forward while also lessening your fallback point. And I think that's the appeal towards athletes, is that the question becomes, how can you get into the zone more, right? Like, how can you be present more and actually activate your power to interact with the moment and get to the heights of your game and really be in that flow state. And it's the same with the women that I work with in my practice. How can they feel more like themselves? How can they heal those missing pieces? And so I work with all kinds of people, but the common characteristics is that they're really willing to look in the mirror, to put in the work. They're very interested in how health and really health, growth, and kind of like exercising their full potential one way or another, and kind of getting out of that survival mode or breaking that cycle that they haven't been able to. And because we're able to look in that holistic way, we're able to take a multifaceted approach, whereas, another doctor may be so hyper-focused on a chemical imbalance or hyper-focused on, a thought pattern, or maybe it's a feeling or diet alone, or, some holistic doctors will throw thousands of dollars worth of supplements at patients, which, ends up really teaching them nothing and almost leaving them feeling even that much more disempowered because you're, just throwing supplements without looking at the whole person, their lifestyle, their mindset, and the choices that they're making along the way. Everything from how they're interacting in their relationships to what they're up to occupationally. So, yeah.
What a great answer. So you guys got that? We know what a holistic doctor is. Yeah, it's interesting. First, let's talk about credentials, and then I want to go on one of your points that you just made. But so I was going to read your bio, and your credentials are amazing. You've done a lot of study. You've got a lot of certifications. So I wanted you to kind of tell them that, because I could have read it,
yeah.
But I wanted you to kind of explain it more what it is.
Definitely, I love it. So I would have never thought I would be in the medical field. I mean, never in my right mind. I had a ton of experiences with medicine that weren't so positive. I never really thought that it worked. We grew up in a home where I didn't know anything about holistic medicine. I didn't know anything about alternative modalities and or integration even. We just went through the mainstream system. I had a lot of skin issues. I had a lot of other issues, and I was on allergies. I was on psychiatric medication, all kinds of things. And so I thought that was just kind of what I got. I thought, okay, I'll keep trying these different medications, and I'm not sure if they'll work, but I'll keep trying. I always had like a hope of like trying to, figure out these health issues. And so not once did I ever, think medicine was interesting, because it had never really worked for me. And I had never had kind of like a miraculous experience with it, so I never thought I would want to be a part of it. Now, I went into school actually as a business student in the entrepreneurship program at University of Miami, and I was playing golf there. And I had this kind of aha moment. I actually came in last in a golf tournament, and I got on the phone with my dad, and my dad is, my #1 fan, my best friend. But he and I were on the phone, and he's like, Brooke, if you keep playing at this level, if you are gonna like lose every tournament, right? You should probably work 10 times as hard over the summer. And meanwhile, I was putting in a ton of effort. I just had all of these issues that were building up. And it was actually, he said, you may, want to consider not playing next year. And it was kind of previously, my answer would be like, no, I'm going to work 10 times as hard. And, I'm going to get better. I'm going to wake up at 5 and, go to bed at 8 every single night and make this happen. But that was the first time, and I was a sophomore, and I'll never forget it, where I was like, you know what? Maybe I do want to do something different. And it was kind of the first time that I recognized, I didn't really have a dream of my own at that point. I had interests of my own. I was already, about to major in psychology indirectly. I didn't even realize how many psychology classes I had taken.
Right.
But I really, at that moment, for the first time, realized I had this choice of like, I've been living my life on such an autopilot, default mode. That experience really woke me up and started to get me thinking about, what do I want? Like, what do I want to do? What am I interested in? And so I decided to quit the entrepreneurship program, to quit the golf team, and really kind of do something completely different. And I switched my major to anthropology, which ended up being kind of like a specialization in medical anthropology and psychology. And that was my undergrad training, and that medical anthropology, that's what really, opened my eyes to the world of holistic medicine. I know nothing about it before, and that's a story maybe for a different time, but it was a really cool experience. And then after that, I went to Florida College of Integrative Medicine, which is local, and it's an integrative school where we learn everything from, comprehensive blood reports to how, a whole Chinese medical perspective on, how to drive certain function with acupuncture, supplementation. We learn a lot about mindset and lifestyle in that program as well. So that's kind of my formal training.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So how many of you guys feel like you're on autopilot? Anybody? I mean, I don't feel like I am right now, but I certainly have felt like that in my life. And it is, when you feel like that, you do need to look at yourself and think, why am I feeling that way, and where should I switch and whatever.
Yeah.
But you talked about in your intro that you don't just throw a bunch of supplements at people.
Yes.
And then when we were talking back there, you said, a lot of my patients, I think you said 40% or something to that number, are counseling more than anything.
Yes.
So I just wanted you to touch on that you're not, some of your patients aren't doing the full thing, you're just doing the counseling.
Yes. So a lot of the people I work with, some people, I really get to use my whole full scope of practice with them. So some people, I'll use everything from counseling to diet lifestyle to functional medicine, which is root cause medicine, where we look at, a lot of lab reports and kind of like dissect nutrient deficiencies, certain systemic issues in the body and whatnot. But a lot of my patients are really just coming to me for a different perspective and to clear the root cause of what's going on mentally and emotionally, while also always keeping in mind that holistic piece of the puzzle. For example, with stress and anxiety, right? There's a lot of intervention that we can do just through perspective. So if you believe that everything is happening to you, right? That's a very disempowered feeling. But if you actually shift that belief into everything's happening for you and you're able to enter the world in that way, I mean, you can immediately feel the shift between everything happening to you and for you, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of that we do, a lot of perspective changing practices. But at the same time, if you're feeling stressed and anxious and you can't sleep at night, well, that stress and anxiety is only going to go, is only going to shift so much. So we have to prioritize based on kind of that patient, that person. And if we can do both at the same time, if we can drive, if we can optimize sleep while also supporting, perception and really strengthening that, well, now we have a game plan and a real way to make progress. So.
Okay, very cool. So does anybody have any questions at this point?
Yes.
How do you deal with, knowing that if you change one thing, it affects everything else, so you kind of don't know the root cause, you might have a bunch of different issues.
Yeah.
You try to tackle one, so let's say about medicine, and you try medicine out on someone, and it has an effect here and here, how do you manage it if you're going a holistic point of view, so everything affects each other?
I love that question. So the first thing I do when anyone walks into my office is we want to clear the slate, right? We want to really clear the slate. Now there's things that are very personalized and tailored to the patient, but there's also some serious things that we need to do to clear the slate and give people an experience. So I am very systematic about how I do things in my practice. It's not just throwing mindset, diet, lifestyle, there's subtle shifts and it's a process, right? So in order to embark on this process, we really have to opt out of the instant gratification, magic pill sort of mentality and opt into one based on a lifestyle, on true change. So there's certain things that I do in my practice, and I can definitely expand on this if we want to. But there's certain things and certain setups that we have to put into place. So one, for example, is how we enter into our world, right? Is actually, I have a kind of a very different perspective on it where I think it's very important for people to begin to connect with their hearts, because there's a lot of science and research that talks about literally placing your hand on your heart can rewire your entire nervous system and actually set the stage to create more space and a different way of entering into your thoughts patterns and actually tapping into your feelings. So there's certain things like that in terms of getting present. A lot of people, and getting present's a buzzword, right? But how do you actually do that? How do you actually get present? So what I've found is that there's the first thing in getting present is you have to know where you go. You need to be able to look at how your mind works before you just get present, right? So if you're going into the future, there's going to be a lot of anxiety, over worry, overthinking, obsessing, because you're thinking about all future things, right? If you're in the past, there's going to be a lot of guilt, resentment, bitterness, hatred, a lot of fatigue, a lot of depression. If you're checking out, maybe you have a need to escape through alcohol, drugs, that bag of chips, exercise, your work, you name it. There's just still that constant need to escape. So that would be like a checking out. Some people are just going through the motions. They're in this limbo-like state of life where there's a lack of interest, there's resignation, there's apathy. So we call that limbo. Then there's like lost, which is where, you know, the harder you try to get out of it, the more you find your way sucked back into it. So I like to name these places present, future, past, checked out, limbo, lost, because that gives us a way to come back and choose to return to the present moment. So the reason I say that is because when you connect to your heart, that's like plugging in a light, right? When you choose to get present, that's like turning the light on. Now what we find when the light's on is we enter into this garage-like area, right? Where it's maybe not the most beautiful. Maybe there's like a ton of these boxes all piled up, filled with outdated thoughts, experiences, feelings, patterns, you name it. But now that the light's on, we get to choose what we want to do with these boxes, right? So maybe your diet's a little messed up, right? Maybe we want to, you know, look at the cravings that you're experiencing. Maybe they're based on a nutrient deficiency. Maybe it's just an addictive sort of chemical that's in the food that you're eating. So now that the light's turned on, we have a way to actually open up these boxes and see what's in them. And that's where we systematically, then we go about clearing the diet. So we'll take out certain addictive foods and bring in nutrient-dense anti-inflammatory foods. In terms of lifestyle, there's core pillars, right? If someone's not sleeping, if someone doesn't have energy, you know, if somebody's not taking time to enjoy life, to relax and play, those are all problems that we want to look at and that we want to solve, right? So those are all core pillars that we really need to work to resolve before we get to the kind of like more extreme tailorization of the treatment plan, if that makes sense. So it's a lot about clearing the slate in the context of the person, but also building a foundation where we're really, you know, bridging the gaps and kind of clearing the vulnerabilities of what could, you know, what could work against that movement forward, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I want to move to, that was an incredible answer, and I'm like, I want to come see you tomorrow. But I want to talk about something that they can literally take today and do and use, like tools and techniques.
100%.
So when I first came to UCF, I was shocked at how the students just seemed so stressed out. I came from public accounting, and I spent 15 years in public accounting, for those of you that don't know. And it is a very hard industry to work in. You know, the typical hours that our accountants would work is 70, 75 hours a week. I mean, I came from an extremely stressful corporate environment. So when I thought I was going to come here to work, that everybody's just going to be, you know, happy and going to school and in organizations and involved with things. And what I realized is a lot of people aren't getting involved with things because they have too much going on. And I also had a lot of students come into my office in tears saying, I'm just overwhelmed. I know there's a lot going on in the world, and we can certainly talk about that and how to manage the stress of everything that's going on in the world, the socio-political climate. But I'm shocked at how stressed out the students are. And I'm thinking, it's just school, you know, it can't be that bad.
Yeah.
But you guys are working too, and there's a lot of stuff going on in your home lives and with friends and stuff. So we'll start with stress, because anxiety and stress are two different things, right? Yeah.
Yep. And they're very closely related.
Okay.
But they are different.
So how can the students manage stress better?
Yep. I love that question.
Okay.
So the first, you know, I'll just tell a quick little story. So when I was in that medical anthropology class, we needed to interview an alternative practitioner, and my partner my partner in the class, we decided to interview an Ayurvedic practitioner, and they went through this practitioner went through these 4 stages of healing. So the first one were lifestyle things that everyone could do on their own. So whether it was switching your diet, you know, going to sleep earlier, just some things that people could do on their own, very easy. The second stage of healing was physical manipulation. So whether that's massage, physical therapy, things that were more topical and tangible that someone could actually assist you with. The third stage was literally penetrating the physical body. So whether that be through acupuncture needles, through surgical procedures, you name it, things that were actually penetrating the physical body. The fourth and the deepest, most invasive intervention was to change the core of someone's belief system, so through perception. when I heard this, everything changed for me. It was a truth that just struck me in such a different way. And that's how, when I think about stress and how to enter into it, that's the first thing I think about, perception, right? How are we choosing to enter into our experiences? All the research goes to show now, a lot of very interesting research, if you are interested in it, out of Harvard University by a lady her name's Aaliyah Crum. There's a book written by Kelly McGonigal called The Upside of Stress that talks a lot about, the research piece of this. But basically, if I'm going to sum it up really quickly, it talks about how if you change the way that you see your stress, your physiological experience changes at the same time. So, and that's kind of like that exercise we did at the beginning, right? The to you versus for you, right? How do you connect with stress? Now, stress is something that's not going to be going away anytime soon if you want to live a growth-oriented life, right? There's always going to be challenges. Some of the most stressful experiences like childbirth and being a parent, or, going to that grad school and applying and, pushing yourself to that limit, public speaking, you name it. Those are some of the most meaningful experiences in life, so we don't want to eliminate those, but what we can eliminate is the noise, right? And the way to do that, I think, is really to get clear on what it is that you're looking to accomplish and what you're moving towards. Start to eliminate the noise, by building up your resources, but also literally letting go of what isn't working in your life. So, I created a program called Let Go Grow, and it's really that simple, right? We want to let go of what isn't working. We want to detox and release, that noise, the things that aren't working, but we also want to keep improving and growing through and activating and bringing in the things that we want to create. So that dynamic also helps, in terms of how we look at stress, how we perceive it. Also remembering that literally, you're the creator of your reality, right? Because you have the power to choose how you perceive your life experiences. You have the power to shift how you're feeling, to really, release and connect with certain feelings. You have the ability to shift your thought patterns. You have the ability to choose tangible choices like what you eat day in and out, what time you go to bed, who you interact with. Are the people in your life supporting you? Are they positive? All of these things are part of this growth piece that can build up your resources. One of the things that we know about stress physiologically is that we are far more taxed when we have a nutrient deficiency, such as B12, right? Our bodies, don't interact with stress in the same way when we're completely depleted. So, we have to look at this holistically in order to get a real answer. Of course, there's acute interventions in, specific moments in time that are also helpful symptomatically. But if we're really to resolve stress and engage in it in a more empowered way, we have to start looking at how we can build up our resources, how we connect to it, but also how we can release what literally is not working in our lives.
So who's ready to release some stuff? I am. Any questions, guys, this far? Yes.
So it feels like there's a lot of similarities between a holistic doctor and a psychologist. So what would you say is like the key difference between the two?
I love that. So psychologists are getting more and more interesting because a lot of psychologists are very open to holistic methods. I guess the major difference in my practice is I literally prescribe diet, lifestyle support. We do comprehensive blood workups, functional lab testing, in certain cases when applicable. One of the major differences in mental health versus what I do in my practice is kind of a concept I like to call coping versus clearing, right? I think there's a very big difference. Coping is maybe that is my least favorite word, because it's a crutch, right? You're still feeling compromised. I mean, think about the difference between the vibration of the word coping versus clearing, right? Coping just sounds like this dull thing. And literally, the meaning of coping is to struggle with, to endure. In the 16th century, it literally meant to layer over a brick wall. So you're still building up stuff. There's still a snowball, but maybe you layer, meditation over it. Or maybe you put some positive thoughts on top of all of this garbage, right? The important thing is to learn how to clear, and I think when you're looking at things holistically, you have the ability to do that, whereas if you aren't looking at things holistically and you're only focused on shifting a thought pattern, it's going to be very difficult to literally clear things in a very whole and complete way. So I like that analogy of kind of like changing the landscape in terms of, where a lot of people talk about positive thinking, but they just want to sprinkle it over that garbage can like I just talked about, right? Well, what about the dirt? What about the nutrients? What about the sunshine? Where are those seeds planted? We have to think about the whole picture, and in that way we can flourish. But if we're just hyper-focused on the mind or a thought or a feeling or one particular experience, we're going to be limited in our capacity to move forward. And now, of course, I'm talking about mental health as a whole as the limitation, maybe not particular psychologists that are more open-minded do refer out and integrate, but I would say that that's kind of like the major difference.
Should I answer your question?
How would you go about changing someone's motivation? Like for me, I get motivated by failure. For like an example,
Yeah.
I would have never made it into finance if I didn't get a C to begin with in the class. And then after that I got a 97. So,
Yeah.
but that's short-lived, and I want to get to the point where I'm like constantly motivated, not
Yeah.
One thing and then you're good for a while and then you have to find something else to motivate.
100%. I love that question, and I think it's so important to be able to tap into those resources. I think a lot of it has to do with literally living a life you love, really following your passions and your dreams and challenging yourself. Really kind of going towards where your heart is pulled in terms of what lights you up, what feels expansive. Now, on a more practical note, how many people in here know what they want to do or have a really good idea of what they're passionate about? Okay, so I would say about half the room, right? So not everyone knows what lights them up yet, but what you can focus on is the intrinsic things, right? So when I was in the entrepreneurship program at Miami, I didn't know, that I was going to be in the medical field, but I did know that I wanted the freedom to be an entrepreneur and do my own thing. I knew I wasn't going to work for anyone else because that just would not be a good fit. It really wouldn't be. But what I did know is that I was after freedom. And so that was my intention, is to do my own thing. I think knowing yourself and how you work, looking at your strengths and really kind of doubling down on your strengths is extraordinarily important while looking at the vulnerabilities over here. Now, from a physiological standpoint, motivation has a lot to do with building up resources in the body, like we talked about earlier, right? So if you're not getting adequate sleep, it's going to be really hard to have energy and mental focus and clarity throughout the day and tap into that motivation. If you're not exercising right, that's a vulnerability in and of itself. It doesn't necessarily matter what you do for exercise, but it does matter that you are moving and activating, the physical body in that way. So I think that fundamentally, it's important to take care of the basics always, never lose sight of that. But in terms of once those basics are checked off, those boxes are checked, that's when it gets fun, right? That's when we can really look at what creates expansion within us, what fits our personality. How can we get creative about this project that's been a drag and on my mind for over a year? And sometimes motivation comes from literally moving through the resistance, right? So sometimes we don't always naturally feel motivated, but once we break through that resistance, we can get there. It's almost like the first 5 minutes of a run. It's kind of a drag, right? But once you get on, minute 6, 7, 8, then the endorphins start flooding, then we start enjoying it, and we've broken through the resistance. And maybe we make that run a little bit easier by changing our playlist, right? Or recognizing that this is something that can get us to a bigger goal, something that we're even more excited about. So it's kind of putting it in perspective, and then also just really knowing yourself and what works for you. How do you roll in this world, right? Like, what's unique to you, and how can you map your actions towards that? That will create a lot of motivation, and it will be intrinsic motivation. It's not motivated on something that's external,
Great answer. I'm in graduate school, and I'm going to school in education, and my class right now is motivational performance. And you hit it. She hit it perfectly, and from academic.
Cool.
So very good.
Thank you.
Anybody else have?
So obviously, like the holistic way is better because she has a big picture, but how would you make it so it's not so overwhelming? Because changing one thing, like it really does affect everything, and so it's hard to kind of choose that one thing to start because the reason why that's so difficult is because of all those other things. So it's like you have to choose, you have to start somewhere.
Yes.
So how do you choose what when it might be hard to do that specific jump in because of this and because of that and this, and everything is affecting each other, which makes it an easier approach almost, because once you change one, it will change the rest. But how do you even start it when that's difficult?
I am in love with this question. Thank you so much for asking. It is. Here's the thing. If someone comes into my practice and there's receptivity there, right? There's that willingness to change. Even if it's this much, I can work with that. It's when people are shut down and closed off where it's not going to work. So, for example, and you're exactly right. So let's say somebody comes in and they're not able to sleep, but there's still all this other, they're in a relationship where, divorce is sitting right there. There's all of these other things going on. Maybe they're severely nutrient deficient. Maybe they have all of these stressful experiences going on at work. If we can just work on their sleep, they're going to have a lot more energy to work on the other parts of their lives. So the key is to just begin. And in terms of, if you're not seeing a holistic doctor, right? If you're not seeing someone, how can you just begin becomes the question. I always recommend doing what feels easiest at first. Where do you have the least resistance? So let's say, something that is going to bring in a lot of energy is just going to the gym. Don't make it a 2-hour gym session. Just go walk for 20 minutes. Do what feels really easy for you. I had this one patient who, had this whole, huge plan to go paddle boarding, 5 days a week. She bought this huge paddle board. She was going to drive half an hour to the beach and back, and that was going to be her workout. And of course, because that was kind of like out of touch with the reality of her life, it never ended up happening. So what ended up working is, just literally beginning, just putting on those running shoes, going on that 3-mile walk that's right around your house. Maybe you start with 20 minutes, that turns into 30, now you're running, now you're walking a half marathon, just begin. That's the biggest key, because then you're going to tap into a confidence within yourself that, whoa, I can change. So that's big, right? The confidence within yourself, having, being able to trust yourself that, whoa, I can change my life. And that will allow you and give you the energy and the motivation to address the other aspects, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Okay, so we talked about stress.
Yeah.
Let's talk about anxiety.
Cool.
Let's talk about, there's all different forms of anxiety.
Yes.
So what are the forms of anxiety, I guess?
So there's a ton of forms of anxiety, right? If you're looking at the DSM, we look at generalized anxiety, social anxiety, panic attacks, all of these different forms. I think that anxiety, we have to look at it in a couple of different ways, right? One, is it a bad thing? Is the first question. When you're, preparing for a public speech, when you're looking at a test, that anxiety can actually work in your benefit. A lot of people love anxiety because that's the only time they get things done. It actually can be your body's way of rising to a challenge. Now, of course, if it becomes long-term and chronic and it's disabling, that's when it becomes a problem. And that's when we have to look at, how we're even connecting to it. A lot of times, anxiety isn't caused by the moment itself. It's really caused by all of this unaddressed stuff. Everything from insomnia to, obviously your perspective of the world, how you're connecting to your feelings. Are you connecting to your feelings? Because if you're not, then we have, this thing that's happening where it's a snowball, right? Now this snowball is following you everywhere. That's the difference between coping and clearing. A little bit of meditation isn't going to change anything if you're snapping out of your meditation and all your problems are still there. So it ends up being more about how, what we do in the landscape, I think, beforehand, and not necessarily about the specific events, even though the specific events can shine light on our vulnerabilities,
So let's talk about panic attack. Has anybody ever suffered a panic attack? I would assume not many people. I'm surprised. I thought there was a higher number than that. So when you're in the midst of one, which I have been in my life, and they're horrible, how do you handle that? I mean, I know you need to work, I know you need to focus, you need to think about why they're happening.
Yeah.
And you just start from there and maybe go see you and all that stuff. But what can you do to help mitigate it from happening while it's happening?
So while it's happening, I mean, this will be different for everyone, but the thing is not to fight it, if that makes sense. Okay, so when you're in the midst of a panic attack, right? If you fight it, it's going to get worse. I mean,
So fight or flight, right?
exactly. Like
Yeah.
if you fight the panic attack, now there's more resistance. Now there's more friction. Now there's more inflammation. Now it's amplified. So the key, I believe, to working through a panic attack is to literally begin to see it as not who you are, right? It's important not to identify with your experience that's coming up. Now, this is another kind of like a philosophical shift, but here's the deal. Like, you're not your thoughts, you're not your feelings, you're not your choices. You're who you are, you're the power behind all of them, but you are not them. So if you believe that you are the panic and the anxiety, well, now you're subjective. Now you're so in it, it's very difficult to get out. Now, if you are witnessing this experience, you're a part of it, but you recognize even if you're feeling anxious and panicked and out of breath and all of these things are coming up, but you still in the back of your mind realize, okay, this is happening for me. I don't understand why. It's totally okay, but it's not me and it's moving through me, right?
Yeah.
That's the way out, is to connect to it without buying into it. What most people will do is they'll get so sucked in, so bought in, so caught up that the fear begins to amplify itself, rather than if you sit here, you're watching this experience unfold from kind of a place of power, you're connecting. Maybe you literally place your hands on your heart. I've had patients who do that, and it's really helpful. You know, certain patients will, you know, take a certain supplement or a certain remedy or a medication with them just so that they know that that's an option. Maybe they never use it, right? Maybe they don't use the medication or they don't use the supplement, but they know that they have it if they need it. And I think kind of business as usual at the same time, right? Like, yes, we're working on these landscape changes. Yes, we want to observe the experience itself in a very different way, even while we're in it, but also business as usual, you know, bringing what you need to bring until you just know you don't need it anymore, until you have that confidence that it's a thing of the past.
Very good. Anybody have questions?
So, like, I understand all of this, like, stuff you're saying, but I feel like a lot of it's not practical for where we are right now, because, like, you're saying, oh, just go for a run, just get more sleep, but, like, that's not really, like, an option a lot of the time.
Yeah. And so what, you know, here's the thing. You have to begin with where you're at, right? Everything is an option if it's important to you, if it's a priority. So it's kind of like maybe not all of this is an option right now, but maybe one thing is. For example, being present, right? That's something that we can all do in real time. We have no excuses not to be present and not to catch where our mind is taking us. So that's something that we can do in real time to activate change, right? Maybe we are able to, you know, go to sleep at a certain time, or maybe we are able to go on a run. Maybe we're not able to do everything, like eat super healthy and do all these things. But we have to start with what we can start with. Begin where you are and allow that to lead you to the next step. That's the key. You know what I mean? Prioritizing and just being receptive to that change. Even asking questions and connecting can really help people. For example, if you can't see how a certain change can fit in your life, but you believe it's going to be constructive for you, that's when you can, you know, literally ask your life questions like, how can I let go of this particular pattern? How can I grow through this experience? How can I bring more sleep into my life? You know, how can I have more energy? And it's amazing when we start looking at life in that very solution-oriented way, it's amazing the answers that begin to come in rather than already blocking ourselves with excuses that we, will have to work through to negate, right? If we're like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this, like there's way too much going on, all of these things, we're stuck before we even begin. So the key is just really being receptive, really tuning in and tapping into your own life, your own resources. What's up for you? What is for you? How can, you proceed with what you already have going on, if that makes sense.
Any other questions? Yep, one in the back.
Do you recommend breaking up your sleeping and your eating patterns into like smaller portions throughout the day, or setting like big blocks of time?
So I see different things work for different people. For example, a woman who has blood sugar issues will most likely do well on a diet that's smaller in meals and more frequently throughout the day, right? Whereas someone who has a different kind of issue may do well with something called intermittent fasting, where they're literally fasting for 14 hours of the day and then eating in a certain period of time. So it's really kind of based on, your lifestyle. There's some interesting research that really support both, but I think, in general, I see most people do well when they're sleeping, for a good 7 to 9 hours at a time. But some people, that's not a possibility, and they do need to take naps through, in the afternoon or certain times of day. So I think that it's kind of, that's one of those things that has to be tailored for you, and I think it can be a really cool kind of like experience to try on both and just see what feels right,
Are there any technologies or apps that you could recommend for being more mindful? That's so bad. Like, I needed my phone to tell me I need to be mindful, but I know that's too much. But is there anything that to help with time management or to reduce stress or to help with? Is there any apps that you love that you recommend to your clients that they can just to help?
Yep. So there are a lot of apps, and I could definitely compile a list for you guys. I'm actually, not so in the know of all of the apps. I know that there's interesting apps out now that literally like show you, how much time you spend on your phone. And of course, there's apps that track steps. There's apps that send you daily affirmations, all kinds of things. I am personally not that kind of person. I just like to live life. Like, I just like to go live, and then I'll figure it out along the way. But some people need, to count calories, to do these things that bring in more structure. And if that's for you, definitely email me afterwards and I can send you some recommendations, but I don't have any off the top of my mind because I don't use them.
Okay.
So.
That's good. That's fair. Any questions?
What would you say about looking up your personality type, like your Myers-Briggs, like in relation to like helping yourself change?
Yeah.
Is that a good idea, or is that bad because then you kind of make excuses based on your personality and like it says like you're not good at this, you're good at this? Or is that a good thing to understand yourself?
So I think it's exactly like what you said, right? It's literally how you enter into it. So I don't think there's such thing as good or bad, really, like right or wrong. I think that there's always kind of like that gray area, and that's where the magic is. It's really how you enter into it that's important. So if you're using it as an excuse, like I'm an introvert, so I'm not going to challenge myself. Okay, maybe that's a problem. Maybe there's going to be a checkpoint, you know. But if you're using it as like, okay, I'm a natural introvert, how can I, double down on that? How can I strengthen the powerful pieces of that while also, maybe putting myself out there more in a way that's uncomfortable? A lot of people think that I'm an extrovert. I'm such a severe introvert. It's ridiculous. When I first started doing public speaking, I was having panic attacks. I moved through them in real time during the public speaking. Like, it was so terrible. But it keeps getting better. I keep putting myself out there more. So I haven't let it disable me, even though it hasn't been easy to not allow it to disable me. It would be very easy to shut myself off from experiences like this. But it's also maybe the most gratifying thing that I get to do in my work. So.
Yeah, I think you need to be careful with the tests are great and they really show where your strengths are, and certainly you want to go to work and find careers where your strengths are, but you should never think of it, and Strength Finders I think does say that you should move away from your weaknesses, and I personally don't believe that. I think that you should move towards your weaknesses to so that you can be more well-rounded, especially in when you go into your careers. I was the worst public speaker on the planet, and then I did Toastmasters forever. And I just knew that I had to fix this. And there's some areas in my life that are definitely areas I need to fix. And they are not my personality. And my personality doesn't align with the areas I need to fix. But I know to be a more whole person and to be more well-rounded in business, definitely. And in my career, I need to fix those things. So hopefully that makes sense. You had a question over here.
Yeah. Do you take any different approaches to short-term causes of stress or long-term causes? Like if we on the side but do it 2 days for like a month-long project.
Yep. So this comes back to knowing your personality as well, I think. So I think that one of the best things about procrastination is the anxiety that it induces that you can use to your benefit. Like that is hyper focus. I mean, when you think about anxiety, that is the fight or flight response in action. It's our body's way of rising to a challenge, right? So use that, you know? That's a great way to move through the stress response because now once you knock that project out, you're no longer stressed, you're relieved. So I think that that's, you know, a literal way when we're talking about like assignments. Of course, like there's certain supplements that can kind of like act as tranquilizers or that can act as kind of like taking the edge off of certain things. For example, before this talk, I used something called Rescue Remedy. It's like this little yellow bottle. You can buy it at like any Whole Foods. I think they even have it at Target and stuff now. But it's something that is so gentle and it's just takes the edge off a little bit. It's not the end all be all. It doesn't change, you know, my whole experience, but it definitely assists me. So I think in acute situations, things like that can be appropriate. Because that, you know, the rescue remedy is what works for me. Like, for example, some people may do really well if they go do an intense workout for 20 minutes and then they can get into that productive mode. Whereas like long term, okay, now we're looking long term, right? Now we're looking landscape changes. You know, how can we not just focus on the one bit major priority that's coming up? How can we look at the evolution of our entire life experience, how we enter into the world, you know, the quality of life that we are creating. That's kind of how that's what the distinction I think would be. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I think how you're making choices is very important.
Yep.
I mean, even with the exchange, we'll use the exchange as an example. A lot of people don't come until the last minute when their points are due. By the way, they come for points, but they didn't want to hear you.
Thank you for being here.
But they procrastinate, and you probably do this in schoolwork as well. You know, you have a big project coming up, and you wait. Well, you're just creating more stress and anxiety for yourself by waiting. So I think being proactive and just like going out for the run, just start writing.
Yeah.
Even if it's, you know, if you're not in the right mind space to start writing, just you gobbledygook onto a paper and something will come out of it that you can use for more of it, you know, and you just have to start, you have to be proactive. And I think the more proactive you are with what you have dedicated to in your life, now that goes back to now remove things that you are not dedicated to, but be proactive to the things you are dedicated to, and then the procrastination will go away and it'll help, I think, relieve a lot.
100%.
Yeah.
Actually, if I can add to that really quickly, a concept that's been coming up a lot in my practice and on my own mind lately has just been completely being on your own team, right? Like a lot of times we're fighting ourselves just completely, mentally, emotionally, everything. But what if you're actually on your own team? If I berated myself after this talk and we're just, oh, you said too many times, and I hear the dinging of Toastmasters, you know, I said like too many times, you know, and I was like completely berating myself, how would I feel going into my next, you know, public speaking engagement? Probably pretty terrible and nervous. But if I, you know, look at this experience objectively and I can evaluate and really be on my own team, like great job, like you put yourself out there, that wasn't easy, you know, that wasn't easy for you, so like cool Brooke, love you, you know, that's a little bit of a different way of, you know, looking at and being on your own team. And I think we all need to do that in the different areas of our lives where we really have our own back and be on our own team, because we would never berate, you know, our best friend or a loved one the way that we do ourselves sometimes. So really focusing on being on your own team and supporting yourself, you know, being your best friend in this process is really important.
Yeah, I think negative thoughts, we all have them, and you know, it's so hard to make them go away, but when you have them, you just recognize them.
Yeah.
Try to put them
Awareness is
aside.
everything.
It's everything. It's part of being present, right?
Totally.
Any other questions? We have 10 minutes, so I'll open it up to questions for the rest of the time. I guess I do have one more question, but anybody else?
there's one.
Oh, okay.
I did hear you reference meditation a couple times, and I know you talk about being in the now, and I personally use meditation in the morning to like start my day and to get in that state for the day. I just want to hear your thoughts about meditation because I've heard mixed reviews on it. So.
Awesome. I love when people enter into it in a constructive way, right? So it sounds like for you, like you have a really cool intention behind it. You're setting yourself up for the day. You're being on your own team. You know, you're creating space to re-enter into your experience. I think a lot of people use meditation in a very inactive, inert way, where they're not actually, where they're kind of just doing it to check the box. Like, this looks like a healthy thing, let me just do this. They're not doing it from that expansive want to place. It's just that they're doing it because they think that they should be doing it, you know? That's the difference. If you're using it and it's feeling constructive and you're gaining from it, if it feels empowering, I would 100% continue. What I do personally for meditation, a really simple practice, I literally like place my hands on my heart for about 3 minutes a day, and I just listen to my heart beat. I just breathe into it, and maybe I set an intention. Maybe I'm really grateful for an experience that I had, or you know, maybe I want to, you know, focus on a certain project and I'm thinking about how I can prioritize this. But I find that literally making this symbol and this connection allows you to enter into your life in just a totally different way. So maybe even it's not just about, you know, a lot of people, when they're meditating, they get really caught up in their thoughts, right? It becomes a whole mind game. It's very difficult to change from that place. You want the space to re-enter. You want to be able to observe your experiences and then choose how you want to change them, how you want them to evolve. So I think it's all about kind of like your intention behind it and how you use that space. A lot of people try to block their thoughts out in meditation, right? They don't want to think. That's a huge problem because there's nothing that you shouldn't be able to think, and they're your own thoughts. So I think if you're blocking them out, well, guess what's waiting for you afterwards. But if you're actively addressing them in the meditation, maybe there's a thought or a fear that's really bothering you. Meditation is a great space to say, how can I let go of this? What is this bringing up in me? You know, what do I need to see here? And the second that you look at that fear, you fear it less. You literally become fearless in a way that you're not necessarily fearless, meaning no fears, but you fear that experience less because you're actually looking at it. When you look at it, you have the ability to learn from it. And when you learn from your experiences, they let go of you and you let go of them, and then growth is just a natural result of the process. So if you're using meditation in that way, that's special. You know, it's all about how you enter into it, I think.
Such a great answer, and that just helped me because I get so bad at meditation because I can't clear my thoughts. Thoughts won't go away; they're there. And I love the idea of facing the fears and understanding the fears, and that the fears will come to you, hopefully in that space. And I know a lot of people do affirmations.
Yeah.
So when you find the fear, then you do affirmations to recognize it and to tell it that it's not valid. So an affirmation might be, you have a test this afternoon, and so you wake up in the morning and you'll say, I am going to do so well on this test. And you say it 7 times. This is what I've heard on affirmation. You might have a different way of affirmation.
The lady in Athena was saying something like this too. That's cool.
And Deanna, yeah. She said she would wake up and face her fear and look at her fear in the mirror every morning and say 7 times something that gives that fear. And she said it transformed her life. So I started doing it after that, and I have had a really positive experience with that too. So that's just a tip.
Yeah, I love that.
Any other questions?
You mentioned earlier for the 4 stages of healing, one of them was changing the core belief system.
Yes.
Can you expand a little more on that? Because when I hear belief system, I think of either like political or religious, you know, and I don't think that's what you're really aiming at.
Exactly. I don't mean that at all. So when I think about belief systems, I think about perception, right? So the way I see it is that perception is kind of at the top, right? When you shift your belief systems in terms of perspective, when you shift the way that you see the world, that influences your thoughts, your feelings, your choices, your physiology, and your life experiences. Now it works both ways, right? When you are getting input from your life and you have these life experiences and a certain physiological experience, that also influences your choices, your feelings, your thoughts, and your perspective. So it really works both ways. You can almost picture a figure 8 in the way that they interact. But by perception, I mean of yourself, of your world. For example, a lot of us as students, right? We are obsessed with grades, we're obsessed with degrees, we're obsessed with getting into grad school, accomplishments, certifications, all of these different things. But if we're doing it from a place to validate our own importance, it's not going to work for us in the same way as if we're entering into it because we want to. We're expanding. We're excited about it. We already know we're important, but we're doing these things because we want to, right? If we're doing it to, striving for these external experiences to validate our own importance, now our own importance fluctuates based on external experiences all of the time. Now we're less important than this person, more important than that person. That's not a way to live. I mean, that's completely going to bring you on a roller coaster. But what if you were to acknowledge and embrace that you're valuable, that you're important, you're unique, and then there's things that you want to do in life that you can go after. It's a totally different way of entering into that experience, and it even frees the experience in a way where it can work for you because there's not all of this subconscious, unconscious pressure, if that makes sense. So when I'm talking now in terms of health, how it directly impacts health, if you don't believe you're important, why would you ever go seek a physician out? Like, if you don't believe that you deserve, to eat healthy and to buy organic or high quality foods, why would you ever spend an extra $1 on filtered water even? Why would you do that if you don't believe you're worth it? So it's not about spending more or less money. It's just about the way that you perceive yourself and are interacting with your experiences. It's something that's a lot of times very deeply hidden and subconscious. But if we can...
It starts when you were born, by how you're
Exactly.
raised. Your parents help build your beliefs.
Yeah.
So you can break down beliefs, but you have to understand what your belief system is.
Yeah.
And you've been growing your belief system since the day you were born. And a lot of external factors created what you do and do not do.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to your question on motivation. Once you understand your belief system and what you want to believe, not what you were told to believe, that it helps you know where your motivation needs to lie. And it'll help you be motivated to intrinsically, or intrinsic fact, things.
100%.
You say it much better than I do,
No.
but I think that's what she means,
Yeah.
too, so.
Yeah, it changes everything. If you
It
believe you're
does.
important, then it's not exhausting to go after those grades. Now it can actually give back to you a little more. So it's literally like those deep-seated belief systems or that deep-seated perspective. If we can let go of what isn't working there and bring in something that's constructive and empowering, that changes your whole world, in a trickle-down way, because then your thoughts are different, your feelings are different, your choices are different, and thus your creations are different, your body, your physiology, your relationships.
And your belief in like diversity is, I love diversity, and that's why I love this campus so much, because it's so diverse. But even understanding other people's cultures and their belief systems,
Totally.
and how they're different from you, and how it all, that it starts there, So it's thinking about your belief system is a very interesting topic.
Yeah, it
And
is.
we could spend a whole hour on just
Totally.
that. Or a day, or a week. But we have hit our time, and I appreciate everybody being so engaging with your questions.
Awesome. Thank you
And
guys so
hopefully you
much.
got something out of this, and have a great day.